adding people to collections. Creating collections is another thing that once you have the ability to do that, you pretty much have the ability to do everything. But you can, so there is some, but not infinite.
For the OS deployment piece, does that integrate into the remote install services for where you net boot off?
Yeah, it uses Riz. I haven't done it. We use Ghost, and we've tried Riz before, and there was a lot of phone home issues after the fact with window file protection system. It kept wanting to phone home back to the server to find files, and that was bad. That server turned off, and then everybody's machine stopped working. I don't think the demo is going to be able to work. I can't seem to get a VPN connection. I did earlier, but it doesn't want a VPN to the office. I'll plug in, and you can see how I admin it. And this is always too many computers. Okay. This is the console I use in all day, every day. It's essentially an MMC snap-in. Looks a lot cooler if it has a network connection to the University of Akron, but remote computer management, there's the SMS plugin and then Active Directory plugin. Under SMS, you have a much cooler looking tree normally, but we have an error instead. Okay, any other questions? Nope.
Have you ever used the Novell Zenworks products?
No, I haven't. I've used Landesk, and that's the only other enterprise management product I've used.
How did they compare to Landesk?
Landesk had very similar functionality, but was multi-platform, and it was more web-focused. So clients would visit websites to get packages that they were licensed for, and that made it a lot easier to be multi-platform, but it was much harder to set up. SMS is a Microsoft product, and they have a tendency to just take 15 minutes out of the box to kind of work. Might need twice as big of a server as another product, but they just kind of work out of the box. SMS is a lot like that. Landesk took about a week to get going. And Landesk requires a minimum of more servers. We're using 5 with SMS, so it's not exactly a low number of servers, but to administer Landesk, it requires a non-domain Windows server and a custom Unix box. Well, the box isn't a custom box, but it's a custom distro that you install in a box. I've also used Tivoli a long time ago, and that was a disaster. But it was never quite clear to me if that was because Tivoli was a bad product or because the Unix administrators who set up the AIX boxes didn't know what they were doing. Because we had network card throughput issues so that the server always choked. And I don't really think that was Tivoli's fault.
I got 2 questions.
Sure.
First one, what are some of the gotchas that you've run into during deployment of rolling this out? And secondly, have you experimented with virtualization, running this on a virtual server?
Virtual servers didn't really get along with SMS very well. I'm a desktop end person, and our focus for SMS was getting software to machines without having to walk out there. That choked kind of badly in virtual PC. I think it's had a lot more to do with the way virtual PC installed software than SMS by itself. In testing, we were trying to test on virtual PCs, and the most important thing before we were ready to roll out was, okay, this is going to replace SUS as our Windows Update service. We need to make sure we can deploy all the updates, and we couldn't ever deploy all the updates to virtual PC with SMS. because they didn't install. They went out to lunch. And some of the gotchas was client installation. All this enterprise management stuff is great and all, but you still got to get the client installed on a machine. And that can be a real issue because you don't want to have to walk out and touch every machine. That defeats the purpose of having a system, so you don't have to walk out and touch every machine. We use group policy to install the client on all the machines, but that is problematic. It leads to a lot of unattended reinstalls as machines get moved around to different OUs. Every time it moves out of the OU and back in, it installs it, or it moves to a different OU that has the client install on it, installs it. When a new version of the client comes out, they released SP1, so we had to change that. We didn't want to reinstall the client on all the systems, change that for new machines, because all the new machines we wanted to install a new client on out of the box. But SMS self-upgraded the old ones, so we didn't need to reinstall it on them, and we didn't want them to everybody's machine on campus when they came in and rebooted the next time, do a 15-minute install of the client that they already had. Client installation issues I would say were the biggest gotcha. We initially deployed it by, okay, we're doing a rollout of 1,000 laptops to all our faculty, so it was easy. The client was installed on the laptops already. The hard part was, okay, how do we get it on the rest of our machines? Okay, I guess that's it. No other questions? Well, thank you for coming to listen to me. And I'm giving another talk tomorrow on something a little bit more exciting. I'm doing the hacking hops. I'm a homebrew person. I've made more than 40 batches of homebrew, and I'll have a bunch of the strange tubing and equipment you use to brew beer tomorrow at noon too. No beer though. They wouldn't let me bring any beer. Only hotel alcohol. No, they wouldn't. I will have.
What if it's free?
It's
Donation.
Froggy told me no.
Not in the public area. Not in the public area. But up in the room. They park at 622. 522 from the other room.
All right, I got some tickets up here to hand out. How many of you, is anybody here using SMS currently? No? You're about to? I'll come get your ticket then. How big of an environment?
Well, we're starting out with 70 servers, Dell servers, and probably about 100 users. We could grow in the next 2 or 3 years.
Do you have an Active Directory domain?
That's part of the initial install. It's going to be Active Directory. But some of it's going to be like half Unix, half Windows on the server side. So if it can do like the VMP or
The VMX.
VMX.
That is a really cool product. If you're seriously looking at a multi-platform environment, if SMS isn't dirt cheap for you, I would look at some of the other products that are multi-platform out of the box.
We've tried Landesk, and it doesn't work with some of the stuff because we're a development shop, and it just doesn't seem to work with some of the security issues that we have because we're on an old version of Solaris. So
Most of the other stuff just doesn't work.
The VMX is made by, I think, Quest Software. They just bought it out. And if you Google for VMX SMS, it will come up. And there's a free 30-day evaluation. It was easy to set up and test. A little bit harder to figure out how to deploy the packages with it to make sure you got it in the right format and got it sending the right commands. And it has an issue of not having a graphical client on any end-user machines, but in a server environment, that's not a big deal.
does it, on the Unix side stuff, does it require SSH, or can you do it over like
It requires SSH.
require SSH?
Yeah. It does a lot of its own stuff, but most of it is sent. The package distribution is sent using SSH. I mean, it's automating SCP commands and then running a shell script or just a command, and so it needs that.
I'm sorry.
Good.
Now, what's the minimum version of SQL Server that you need to be running that SMS will support?
I think the one before the most current. the new SP2 of SMS 2003 requires SQL Server 2007 or whatever the current version is.
Yeah.
But I believe older versions would work with the older version of the SQL Server.
Okay. How much, I guess it would be sort of like site specific, but like overall, how much load is SMS going to put on the SQL Server? Like what is the SQL Server? What is the database keeping track of? Is that?
It's a pretty big database, but it's not a huge number of transactions a second or anything like that. SMS is a Rastafarian program in that it is batch processing. So the client delivers text files, and then those text files are all processed in mass at scheduled intervals. So it's not a lot of transactions, and they're pretty batched. Our SQL Server is not a monster. I mean, we've got a 3,300 client site and a 200 server site. And they're running on the same SQL Server, and it's a 1U Dell rack mount. I think it's a 1850. So it's dual processor, 1U rack mount.
SQL Server is more as like a warehouse.
Yeah, yeah.
That was my question: is how much load is it going to put on? Because the place I work at, we've got several vertical apps that are all talking to. We've got 2 SQL servers, and sort of thinking ahead, I didn't want to have to build another SQL Server box. So.
As long as you're not talking about crazy number of clients or adjusting. By default, the clients check in every hour, and they do a software inventory every 7 days and a hardware inventory every 7 days. So it's not, if 100 clients, it's not very much data. I mean, it's not. 3,300 clients, it adds up relatively fast, and we've decreased the default software and hardware inventory time because we use SMS for a lot of mandatory updates for packages, and we need to run a software inventory before we retry if it failed, because they're laptops and they fail a lot.
Yeah.
We get 30 or 40% first try with silent updates failures, because most.
Because of people shutting down.
Yeah.
So when you advertise that like an update is available on Word or whatever, how is outside of having to start control panel and then look at the advertisements, how is the user informed? Like, hey, there's an update for.
There's a task tray icon that shows up when a new.
Like Windows update. Like
Yeah, most of ours are completely silent. If it's a security update, we make it silent. It's going to silent and mandatory, and they're mostly small enough that that's not a big deal. We deploy IE6 silent and mandatory. That sometimes causes issues because it's on 2,000 machines and they're older machines and they have a tendency to be slow. But
outside of making the updates silent, like how are there other ways besides powering off the machine that the user can cancel the update, or do you ever have any problems with that? Like, I mean, I guess if
there aren't other ways the user can easily cancel. I mean, you can go into the task manager and you can kill the process, because it is, it's running a program and it shows them task manager. I mean, I've done that in testing. Oh crap, what am I running? And go in there and you kill it and stop it.
So this is like a user space. The client is like a user space thing. So it's if you can get to task manager, then you can kill it.
Yeah. Well, and especially the installs that it spawns, because it's actually spawning a process. So you can go in and see IE6 setup, and you can go, oh, it's installing that, and you can click on it and kill the process.
If the client is a user space application, the client
Client can kill. When it actually kicks off the install, can you tell it who to run the installation program as?
Yeah. So you can create a domain level software distribution account that this is who it's running the software as. That's one of the options in the set up the packages. Do you want it to run it with the user's credentials or some other credentials? Okay. Turn off my microphone and give away